There were fires in Yosemite National Park here in California on June 26, 2022. They were the Washburn fires that spread quickly. These fires revealed something that science cannot explain. I am a firefighter, and during the fires earlier this year in California, a lot of rescue crews were called to help. I swear on everything I hold dear to me that there has to be some sort of monster or monsters in that national park. Myself and 3 other firefighters saw something that changed our lives. 2 days before we got sent to deal with the Washburn forest fires, our captain told us that they needed volunteers and that our department was able to send 4 of us. That would be me, J, E, and S. I went home and told my wife what was going on, that I had to leave to help out with the Washburn fires. At 3:30 a.m. on June 26th, I was awakened by a call from S. "Yeah, what is it?" I said. S replied, "Hey Adam, I know it's early, but we've been asked to come leave ASAP. Seems the fire is spreading pretty fast, and the crews there need help towards the northern side of the fire." I told him I'd meet him at E's place. He said he'd already called Jay, that Jay was already on his way to my house. I got up and told my wife what's going on. She didn't say anything, she just looked at me concerned. Finally, after about a minute of silence, she said, "I love you. Please be careful." I replied, "I love you too. Don't worry, I'm gonna be fine." I truly believed that. Being a firefighter for almost 6 years, I learned a thing or two. I got ready and set my bag by the door. I started to make myself a cup of coffee when my phone notification went off. It was Jay. Said he'd be pulling up in a minute. I looked out the kitchen window and I saw Jay pulling up in the front yard. I met him at the door and invited him inside, asking if he'd like a cup of coffee, but he declined, saying he had some in the truck as well as several packs of Red Bull. We set off then, meeting at E's place, where we loaded up into 2 trucks packed with all of our gear. Living in California, if you don't know, it's hot during the summer. And at that time in the morning, it was about 77 degrees. But during the day, away from the fire, it was about 103. We drove for 2 hours, and by then we got pretty close to base camp when we saw some animals running away from the fires off to the side of the road. He said over the radio from the other truck that we needed to slow down to avoid hitting any deer or something else. Jay responded, "You're only cautious because you don't have insurance." We laughed and carried on more cautiously. By the time we made it to base camp, we could see the hillside glowing in the distance. We saw rescue crews pulled over on the side of the road. We stopped and asked about the situation. One of them said he had to pull the camp farther back due to how much smoke was coming through. Crews were coming down there, setting up a new camp here. We put the hazard lights on, pulling off next to the other unit. A few minutes later, about 18 more units showed up. That's a lot of people trying to get control over this blaze, which was now quite close to a small town and some homes. Another 2 units kept going past us. The captain commented that the campers who had been found were alive, but they had inhaled a lot of smoke and were suffering from dehydration. One of them had mild burns. We got geared up, checked our masks and tanks, got our axes ready, and were given a starting position. Now, controlling the spread of fires and keeping a lookout for all of your men and other people is trouble. Fighting this blaze went on for weeks, rotating crews in 6-hour shifts. This fire was massive when we got there in the beginning, and it was only about 20% contained. We got a call that one of the civilians at the Southgate Brewing Company reported that they had a younger brother who had not been heard from in a couple of hours, that he was supposed to be back at his cabin. Our unit was the closest to it, so we went to check it out. That call came on July 2nd. S and I had gotten our things ready, and he was almost done sharpening our axes since we have to keep them well maintained in these situations. Jay was getting the location of the cabin while he and the captain marked a route, trying to figure out the best way possible at the moment. We left about half an hour later. We took the ATVs that were available to use, and we made our way to the location of the cabin. On the way there, we saw other crews working and the sound of helicopters overhead. An hour into our search and rescue, we found the cabin covered with fire retardant from helicopters flying above. Even so, it had some fire damage. E notified base camp that we found the cabin and gave them a description. Over our radios, we heard base camp give us the okay to search, but to be cautious of the structure. They let us know that another unit was heading our way to provide support. J and S checked the sides to make sure we could enter, but E already went in, like an idiot. Worried about E, I followed him instead of waiting. We went inside. It was smoky still, but what was much worse was the body we found. It was burned, but it looked like it had been torn into first. We stood there, horrified. Jay said, "What the heck happened here?" S was walking around, checking, and suddenly a loud crash was heard. We looked back. S was gone. We scrambled to where we saw him last. We heard him yell and looked around. His cries seemed to be coming from a crawl space trapdoor kind of thing on the cabin. S yelled up at us to get a rope because his ankle had been broken. Now, a lot of people might assume a 5-foot drop like that wouldn't be dangerous, but our gear weighs between 70 and 80 pounds on a normal day, and during large fires, it could contain an extra 20 pounds. Jay asked S if he could stand up. He tried. He was able to get up and lie against the wall. E tossed the rope down to him. As he was wrapping the rope around himself, he looked up at us and began to laugh. He joked, saying at least the axe didn't go up his butt. We laughed, but carefully got him out. J and E got him to the door. I went and pulled the ATV around close to him, and I got him on board. E checked his foot. No blood, which was a good sign, but his foot was swelling up like a balloon. J volunteered to take him back to base, and we agreed. E told me to grab a camera off the ATV to take photos of the scene because of the body inside. We finished up, called it in, relaying all the information back to camp. The captain told us the unit coming to help us had to be turned around and that we needed to head back ourselves. But we weren't finished with the scene yet. By the time we were done there, we realized it was mid-afternoon. E went back inside at one point, slowly walking in so as to not disturb anything of the scene. Then he called me inside. I went in and saw him pointing his flashlight into the hole in the floor.
"Look, animal tracks. They look like dog prints, but a lot bigger."
Now, I was assuming it was a big dog. I didn't really believe in any sort of supernatural stuff. We left that cabin, and standing there right next to our ATVs, we saw something. There was this tall dog-looking thing, or perhaps some weird bear. I don't know what it was exactly, but when I saw it, I just stood there, frozen in shock. Then I was yanked backwards. I hit my back on the floor. E slammed the door shut, well, what was left of it, and he slid the charred couch and dresser in front of the door. I tried to ask what he was doing, but he put his hand to my mouth and glared at me, as if to say, "Quiet." Now, E is ex-military. He'd been in the army for 8 years. I've never seen this man show an ounce of fear, but there he was, pale white. He looked how I felt. He began to look around, axe in hand. He checked the 3 windows without touching them, but the one that was broken he covered with a small end table that he stuffed quietly to the frame of it. We both looked at each other then, not saying a word. Then we both remembered there was a massive hole in the floor. We looked around, then had an idea. We flipped the kitchen table onto its top, then slid it over the hole. We were thankful it was big enough to cover it. I whispered over to E,
"We're gonna have to leave soon."
but he told me to simply listen. I wasn't sure what he was talking about. He shushed me and said listen again.
"What? All I hear is the wind and fire." "Exactly. Something that big out there has not made a single noise."
We called the captain up on the radio. We said we were stuck in the structure as it collapsed and we needed evacuation. We heard them say that Metaflight was on its way. We let them know to be cautious, as a frightened bear was in our vicinity. The captain acknowledged that information.
think we can make it to the ATVs?
I asked E. He paused before he said anything, and he looked at me.
I'm not sure. Did you see that thing's hands or paws or whatever the heck it had? No, I didn't. I just saw its face. You think it's some idiot in a ghillie suit? No way that was a person. Too big.
Those who know how tall ATVs are, this thing's knees were about the height of the handlebars. Outside, it looked as if it was getting dark out. In reality, I think the winds had shifted, and smoke began to push towards us. We knew we'd be in trouble soon. Plus, we had less than an hour of air in our tanks. The timer on our watches began to sound. Suddenly, the back wall where the bathroom was at sounded like someone was kicking a bass drum as hard as they could, just louder. We shot straight up, axes in hand. Then, even through our helmets, we could hear this deep growl. There was such bass to it. We could feel it in our chests. We were only a few feet from this thing, and all that stood between it and us was a weak door. Adrenaline and fear coursed through my body. We heard the helicopter coming closer. E spoke.
We need to move closer to the door. Now.
We rushed to the door. I pushed the small couch out of the way as E knocked the shelf out of the way too. We pulled the door open. Then, as we did, the table over the hole flew straight up, and this brown-furred creature stood up there. It was waist-high from the hole. The two of us ran out, shutting the door hard behind us. Metaflight was just overhead. They lowered a rope ladder. We quickly scrambled to it and climbed as fast as we could. Finally, after forever of climbing, we were inside the helicopter, gasping for air. E looked at me.
We made it.
I looked over at one of the medics on board. Then E told the pilot to wait. He grabbed a flare camera, and through the infrared, he grew pale. I could tell even through his dirty face.
Get us out of here,
he shouted. He sat back down. I could see tears making a clear path along his soot-covered face. We made it back to base, where Jay met us when we landed. He went with us to get checked out. He asked what happened. I said the building fell on us. While we rested in the medical tent, I looked over at E. What did you see through the camera? Slowly he looked up at me, and he said simply, 6. More tears fell down his face. It took me a second to understand what he was saying. We had been surrounded. There were 6 of those things around and in the cabin. We were both flown to the nearest hospital, where we had to stay for a few days. After that, we were cleared to come back. E and I didn't mind, but only if it meant helping out at the edges to stop the progression of the fire. On August 22nd, weeks later, they finally got it under control. Soon after that, E resigned, getting a job working as security. A few weeks back, at the beginning of October, E and I told S and J what really happened. Jay, midway through his drink, coughed and spat out his beer. Really? About 4 days before the fire, we found a group of 6 by a small pond about 2 miles away from the cabin. They all appeared normal, but they gave off this weird vibe. They refused treatment, said they'd only been in the area because their car broke down. Funny enough, we didn't find any cars, nothing of the sort on the service roads. All 6 of them were big guys too, about 6'4" and easily over 230 pounds. I asked, could you recognize them if you saw them again? Oh yeah, you don't forget these kinds of people. They made me want to leave them there and never come back. Then he spoke up. I understand that feeling. I work with a big guy, a security guard like me. Makes me feel uneasy, like I need to get away from them. S laughed. Hey Jay, that's probably one of your werewolf friends. I laughed, tossing my empty beer bottle back into the box to grab another. Hey, Adam, he said. I looked up at him and said, what's up? He pointed his bottle towards a green pickup truck that was pulling in down the street. What about it? Well, that's the truck the guy at work drives, but the owner said he was on vacation. or hunting or something. We all looked up at the truck. A large man was just getting out. We all laughed. S said, "Let's invite him in for a beer." The sun was setting, and we all began getting ready to leave S's place. We put the chairs back in the garage, picking up the bottles from his driveway. As Jay was walking to his truck, the guy with the green truck at the house at the end of the street got into his truck and began heading down the road. He slowed down and pulled right up next to E's window while he was sitting in his car.
"Hey, ain't you the new guy at work?"
He replied, Yeah?
"Pretty chill job, ain't it? I'll catch you later."
He then drove off in that green Dodge pickup, and all I could think about was how dirty that truck looked. I looked over at Jay and he stood there staring straight at the truck. I asked if he was all right. "Did you have too much to drink, buddy?" I added, trying to be funny. He looked straight at me. "Adam, that was one of the guys I was telling you about." My family and I live in the country, on 10 acres near the Arkansas-Oklahoma state line. I'm not a very spiritual person other than being Christian. Never messed around with the supernatural or paranormal stuff, outside of listening to some podcasts when I'm bored. I've sometimes gone on Bigfoot hunts, just for fun, more of an excuse to go on night hikes for a good thrill. I've never seen a ghost or an apparition per se, but I have seen and heard a few weird things that I cannot explain. I do not intend to embellish or twist the facts to make this story sound more interesting for the sake of the show, and I will not mention any details that I'm not certain of. So our little 10-acre plot is mostly wooded. We have plenty of neighbors around in spite of being somewhat secluded and out of city limits. I grew up playing in the woods with my brothers and sisters, and later my nieces and nephews. If there are 2 or more people out there, the atmosphere always seems pretty friendly and cheerful, if you know what I mean. But at night, it always feels like the mood changes. I don't know for sure where I stand on there being or not being ghosts in this world, but I do think that certain spirits haunt certain places. Not like a ghost, more like a lingering feeling left behind by those who have dwelt there before. For instance, a place where a horrendous crime was committed, or a battlefield, or a house full of happy memories and joyous occasions. Either way, the place where you are affects the way you feel. Now to get to my story, or stories. I've always been an outdoorsman. Mother Nature is where I feel at peace. I understand the way that the Native Americans felt about this land before we ever set foot here, a kind of partnership with the land and its creatures. I've spent many evenings, and will continue to spend many evenings, outside next to a campfire under the stars, just enjoying God's creations. I often go outside to relax, recover from the workday, to get away from people and the frustrations they may bring. But sometimes, the night feels different on different days. The first time I felt this was on an overcast evening in October of last year. I'd finished music practice, and I had made a campfire outside to spend some time alone. That evening felt different, though, like something was telling me to go back inside. But stubborn as usual with me, I didn't listen to my gut feeling. I decided to stay out and enjoy the cool night air, even if the woods felt creepy that night. I'd been sitting out there for about an hour when I began to hear this strange music coming from our woods. It sounded like a flute, with long, drawn-out, mournful tones. Being a musician myself, this sound captivated me, and I felt as if I could feel the sentiment behind it. It was sad. It was ancient. I quickly went inside and grabbed my mom. She was texting someone and said she would be out in a minute. But the music had stopped, and by then it was too late for anyone besides me to have heard it. No, it didn't feel creepy or demonic. It felt like the past, nothing more. A few months later, under the same circumstances, I saw the silhouette of a hooded figure walking through our field towards the tree line, where it then disappeared. Again, it didn't feel wrong or malicious. It was like seeing a figure from the past. I say this because we have several really old cabin foundations and ruins on ours and our neighbors' properties, with a few old wells and some really old piles of rubbish that people dumped over time. Some of it dates back all the way to the 1800s. I somehow get the feeling that the hooded figure and the music, which I've heard a few more times now, are one and the same. Not a malicious demon or a silly ghost from a cheesy horror film, just an illusion of a figure from the past. Perhaps an old medicine man or something of the sort. I don't know why, but that's what it feels like to me. I haven't shared the full details of all of this with my family, as they may think I'm weird, which is understandable. But I think that what I've seen here is only for me, as no one else but a select few have seen or heard anything of the sort. I'm not a believer in the traditional white sheet ghost with red eyes kind of stories, but I think our lives leave echoes behind, kind of like a voice in a long tunnel, that even when the voice has stopped, someone farther down the tunnel might hear it if they take the time to listen closely and quietly. Good or bad, these echoes are there even if we choose to talk over the top of them. I hope you enjoyed this story and can relate. This story started when my best friend E first moved into her new house. She invited me over before school started again, so around late August. We planned to sleep outside in a large tent that could fit up to 20-ish people, in a little clearing in her backyard. Mind you, she had a really big backyard. We were enjoying the day, exploring and swimming, eating a bunch of junk food. It was getting dark, and we, alongside her parents and grandmother, went to start a bonfire in the fire pit. We collectively went searching for twigs and sticks. We soon came back with a big pile of sticks and twigs. When it was completely dark, we had a large fire going, and E and I were making s'mores. Soon enough, her grandmother left, and her parents went inside for the night, leaving us to have to go to the tent. Of course, we didn't go straight to bed, since that would be boring. So we played some games and ate more snacks. We were casually being silly when, all of a sudden, we heard twigs snapping. We shook it off as a nocturnal animal of some sort, then went back to playing our games. Not even 2 minutes later, we heard footsteps, but they were practically running. The closer they got, the more we realized this was not an ordinary animal. These were very heavy. It sounded like they had come from the roadside, due to them being so extremely close to us. We were shaking, scared out of our minds, but then we heard it run past our tent. Then we were confused and scared. Now, we had been pretty careful to make sure that we didn't leave anything out from previous activities outside the tent, so we didn't quite know why this animal was in a rush over in that direction. We had a small window that we could look out of, but we weren't too sure if we were going to be able to see a whole bunch, due to where our tent was set up. And yes, just like we thought, we weren't able to see much. But what we did see was a tall and furry creature, standing in the motion-activated lights that my friend had installed on the front porch. It was around 6.5 feet tall, bending down to fit through the roof of the porch. It had what appeared to be black fur, almost as dark as the night itself. We stared at the thing for a solid few minutes before it finally noticed us. It stared back before we could duck out of the way. Those eyes looking at me will forever haunt my mind. They were bright blue, like we were staring into an open sky. After it had noticed us, it didn't run towards us, but instead began to run away from us to the road. We were horrified, and we planned on going back inside. E and I didn't instantly go in, since we were still as shaken as ever. We went in an hour and a half later, when we knew it would be safe. We just covered E's window and tried to get some sleep. We didn't say anything or try to wake up her parents, since we didn't want to wake them up for a story that they probably wouldn't believe. Instead, we waited until the morning, and just as we expected, they didn't believe a word of it. I was thankful I had plans with my brother that day, so I wouldn't have to witness that creature again. Though, only 1 week later, my friend saw those same bright blue eyes staring at her through her window. I don't care if anyone believes this story or not. From what I know, this world is not what you might expect. What can I say? Just know you may not be a believer in things like this until it finally happens to you. Expect it when you would least expect it. Thank you for listening. This story took place last year. I live in a small town near a national park. I've been there all my life, and probably won't be leaving anytime soon. The same can't be said for my friends, though, who went out into the big city when it was time for college. Now, I also went to college, but to a town not too far from where I live. It would take me about half an hour to get there by bus. Two of my friends, the ones who are involved with this story, went out to the capital city of my state and lived there in flats, since the ride there would take them more than 4 hours every day. I soon dropped out since the college life wasn't really for me, but my friends stayed. When they eventually had some free time for the holidays, about 2 to 3 weeks, one of them proposed the idea that we go camping, since we all haven't seen each other for quite some time. I'm not really an outdoors person, but I said why not, and I decided to join them. One of my friends, Mike, I was really close with. We used to hang out every day before he moved, and we always played video games together. With the other friend, however, Gabe, I wasn't really that close. I did know him from primary school, but I didn't really talk to him much. We would chat here and there when we were in a group chat or on Discord, but nothing outside of those interactions. Originally, there were supposed to be 4 of us, but one person declined, so it was just us 3. Mike and Gabe were pretty good friends though, so I wasn't worried that it would get awkward on our trip. Anyway, we would be staying for 3 days on one of Gabe's family members' properties. The dude was rich, what can I say? After we were done preparing, we set off. The trip there would be long. We were driving from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m., but we had a pretty good time. Those 3 hours flew by pretty fast. When we finally arrived, Gabe's uncle was there to greet us. He was the one who owned the property. The property was a big forest in which his uncle and his buddies would sometimes hunt. His uncle said the forest was pretty safe, that he had never encountered any dangerous animals when he was hunting. Now, how Gabe talked him into letting 3 18-year-olds go there unsupervised, and how he thought that was a good idea, I don't know. But I wasn't complaining. His uncle then led us into the forest. We followed. We walked on a dirt path through the forest for about 10 to 15 minutes. Then we went off the trail to where our camping spot would be. However, a few minutes after we left the trail, I got this feeling like somebody was watching me. I just brushed it off. That is, until I saw something moving out of the corner of my eye. It looked like something black was running through the forest, but since no one else seemed to have seen it, I didn't speak up. Probably just my imagination, I said to myself. After another few minutes of walking, we made it to a small clearing where we'd be camping. After the uncle showed us around the spot, he went back onto the trail and out of the forest. We began setting up our tents pretty soon after that. but that would prove to be quite a challenge, considering none of us had ever set them up before. Outside of me going camping a few times before with my family, this was basically everyone's first camping trip like this. And as a note, I had never set up a tent myself. That job had always fallen on my dad on our family trips. After we somehow managed to get everything set up, we ended up chatting and joking around for a while. That's when Mike said, "Let's go and explore around the forest. I want to see what's out there." "Yeah, but what if we get lost?" I jokingly replied. "It'll be fine. We won't go far. We can just go in one direction so we don't get lost if you want." Mike insisted. And so we started to explore, going deeper and deeper into the forest. It wasn't really all that special. Everywhere we looked was just trees and bushes. After about 10 minutes of walking in a straight line, we noticed that some of the trees had weird markings on them. Some had weird symbols carved into them, others just had big scratch marks. We were all getting bad vibes from it, but Gabe said that there were probably some kind of hunter marks, since his uncle and his friends used to hunt around here. That put our minds to rest, even though deep down we all knew it probably wasn't the case. When we began walking back to our campsite, I got a strange feeling. That same feeling I felt when we went off the trail earlier with Gabe's uncle. I felt like I was being watched. I began to look around us, but the only thing I saw were trees and tall grass. We did later see a deer on our way back, which was kind of nice. After we arrived back at our campsite, we started building a campfire, as it was getting dark then. We took out our food supplies and beer and started to cook. While we were eating and enjoying ourselves, Mike suddenly stopped and hushed us. He then told us both to look where he was now pointing. Gabe and I turned our heads in the direction of his finger. We soon saw what he was pointing at. About 300 to 400 feet away, there was something behind a line of trees. We couldn't quite see what it was. The only thing we could see was the color. Black, similar to what I saw when we were walking with Gabe's uncle. After we stared at it for a while, the thing moved farther away and we could no longer make it out. "What was that?" Gabe asked. "I don't know. Maybe it was your uncle?" Mike answered back, trying to explain what we saw. "Well, I think I saw the same thing when we were still with his uncle, so it probably wasn't him. Maybe it's some kind of deer," I added. Do solid black deer even exist?" Mike asked, with a puzzled look on his face. "How do we know it's not a wolf or a bear or something like that?" The evening soon turned into us bickering about the thing we just saw, and the conversation ended on it being a black deer. Satisfied with that answer, Mike soon went to sleep, as it was already night and we were all exhausted from the car ride and the hike we had to do to get here. Gabe and I stayed awake for a while longer, but he too soon went to sleep. I couldn't really sleep, because I kept thinking about what we saw, and about those weird markings on the trees. But soon enough, sleep got me too. After I don't know how long, I was awakened by a large thud near my tent. I zipped open my tent to see what it was, and I saw something terrifying. On the ground near our campfire lay a dismembered corpse of a deer with both front legs missing and a big chunk taken out of its neck. The stench was unbearable. Soon both Mike and Gabe woke up too, only to be met with the same sight. About 20 feet next to it, there was something else, something standing in the darkness. From what we could tell, it looked to be about 8 feet tall and had these shining eyes like animals do. We were all standing there in silence, in shock. None of us knew what that was or what just happened. After we locked eyes with this beast in the shadows, it let out the scariest, blood-curdling roar I've ever heard. We ditched all our stuff there and we started running in pure darkness, hoping to find the trail and to escape. After running for a good while, we finally found the exit out of the forest. We climbed into our car and drove off at the speed of light. As we were about to leave, I looked back into the woods. There, at the start of the trail, were two glowing green eyes looking back. I have no idea what that creature was, or what it wanted. It didn't want to kill us, since if it wanted to do that, it probably could have done so a number of times before we escaped. My best guess is that it just wanted us out of there. After the event, I heard from Mike that Gabe tried telling his uncle what happened, but he didn't believe him and blamed it on alcohol, even though we only drank one bottle each. Our lives returned to normal, and we frequently talk about it. None of us know what it was, but one thing's for sure. We're never going camping there again.